All right, guys, so we got to talk about how the mainstream liberal media is coping with the reality that the Democrats may be facing a disaster come the midterms, okay? They are projected to get blown out in the House and to maybe, just maybe, lose the Senate if things go the way they're currently going. But who knows? I mean, the Republican Party, they could blow this, right? I mean, they could blow it, but we will see. However, again, that doesn't stop the mainstream liberal media outlets like MSNBC from taking a massive amount of copium to try to deal with the reality that is going to happen for the Democrats, right? And we got to talk about this conversation between MSNBC Peacock host Zerlina, who is one of these irrelevant MSNBC hosts who only really has her job because they want to say that, hey, we have a black woman that's hosting one of our relevant shows that nobody will watch, right? And this other guy named Kirk Bardella, whom used to be a part of the Republican Party. However, he deflected from the Republican Party and became a Democrat back in 2017 after Trump got elected. And during this conversation, they're going to tell us exactly why people like them, the mainstream liberal elite and the Democrat Party, are out of touch with everyday average Americans, as they're going to argue, right? They're going to argue, listen to this. They're going to argue that worrying about inflation, gas prices, and the economy is white privilege. No, I'm not kidding. That's literally what they say. Worrying about inflation, the economy, and gas prices is white privilege. Take a listen.
So if you think about what you just explained in terms of how it's a liability, how playing, in the culture war space on issues like LGBTQ plus rights or even abortion, how that could be a liability for Republicans. But one of the pieces of conventional wisdom I read a lot about is that inflation and the cost of things is a liability for Democrats. I mean, how do you think that balances out? Do you think that bodily autonomy in the minds of a voter who's going into that polling booth, do you think that's more top of mind than the cost of their gas?
You know, I think ultimately that in order to even have to care about inflation, you have to be alive. And if you're a woman right now who has a difficult pregnancy that's threatening your health, you know what? That's going to matter a lot more to you, I think, than inflation.
One of the things that you said there that I really think is important is the fact that, inflation, it's almost a privilege to care about inflation as your number one issue. The same is true of gas prices, or even the idea that it's the economy, stupid. I always found that analysis lacking because as a black person, I don't want to get killed on the way to my job. So I'm glad I have a job. I'm glad I make a living wage. But if I can't be alive, then what does that other stuff matter? I mean, speak to the idea that some of this stuff is existential in the minds of the Democratic base in a way that it's maybe not for the middle of the country, the so-called middle, or even more conservative-leaning voters.
Yeah, listen, if you just lost your house because of a flood in Kentucky, if you just lost your livelihood because it burnt down in a wildfire, if you just lost your life because you are the wrong color and you were pulled over somewhere, inflation doesn't really matter to you or to your loved ones. There are much broader things going on right now in this country that affect so many demographics that the dollars to cents case that has been made time and again about, like you said, it's the economy, stupid. There's a blind spot there, and you'll notice that the majority of people who make that statement are generally white. There's a real reckoning going on in America right now, and we're seeing multiple things converge from the threat to climate change that's upending people's lives and homes, to the struggle with social justice, to still the ongoing struggle with a pandemic, not to mention, again, what Republicans have done just advancing an entire war against women. Those are things that I think cut much more personally and directly than the overarching issue of inflation, because like you said, it's almost a luxury to even have to think about that when these other things are threatening your everyday life or the lives of your kids. I mean, we live in a country right now where if you send your kid off to school, you don't know that child's going to come home safely because Republicans are in the back pocket of gun manufacturers and the NRA. Those are the things that I think matter just as much, at least, as inflation.
Wow. Wow. That's probably one of the stupidest segments I've ever heard in my life. Okay, that was an extremely ignorant and out of touch segment that I do think actually is the mainstream thought process of Democrat strategists and by extension the Democrat Party. I really do. Think that's what they believe. That's why they focus so much on some of these issues that really don't matter, like social justice, right? And, police reform and all this other stuff, because they really don't want to talk about the economy. Maybe they really do think that worrying about the economy is a privilege. But let's break down what they're saying here, because there's just so much to go over here. But let's just start just with the basics. It's like they're making an argument that it is a privilege, specifically white privilege, by the way, white privilege, to have to worry about inflation, gas prices, and the economy. When these are the same people always talking about how black people and so-called people of color are at an economic disadvantage to whites, right? That there's a wealth gap. But by definition, doesn't inflation mean prices rising? And wouldn't prices rising mean that the people that are going to be most disproportionately affected by prices rising are going to be the people that have less wealth, that have less income, which, according to these people, right, they're the so-called people of color, right? The so-called people of color are the most economically disadvantaged people in this country, according to them. So how is it a privilege, white privilege specifically, to worry about inflation when inflation really affects the lowest income among us the most? Not to mention that there also are white people who are poor and low income, right? Let's not forget that. There are plenty of white people in this country that are low income and poor, right? In fact, 43% of welfare recipients are white. Now, that's disproportionately less than their population. And Hispanics and blacks, who make up 28% and 23% of the welfare recipients respectively, they have disproportionately more people on welfare than their population. But again, when it comes to white people, they still make up most of the welfare recipients. It affects them as well too, even though they're white. I'm just saying, are you telling me they're not worried about the economy? But again, we all know what the answer to that question is. Of course they are, because history has shown us that most presidential elections, right, or even midterm elections by extension, are decided by the economy. It doesn't matter what else is going on in the country. If the economy is good, then the incumbent or the incumbent party usually stays in power. If the economy is bad, then the incumbent party gets kicked out of power. Well, the reason why is because what people feel the most, what they care about the most, is money, right? They care about their wallets. It's really that simple. But again, this is an attempt to try to tell people what they should and shouldn't care about. As a black person in this country, you have white privilege. It is a privilege to care about inflation. You're not actually black if you care about inflation. As a black person, you should be worried about police potentially killing you on the way to work. When it's like, statistically speaking, as a black person on my way to work, I should be much more concerned about potentially being killed by another black person than a police officer. It's not even close. But again, let's not let facts get in the way of the narrative here, right? Because as a woman, according to this guy, right, who, can you believe, used to be a Republican, he says, how can you worry about the economy when you might lose your life, if you get pregnant? And again, this is just another example of how out of touch these people are. Look, they might be right about the issue of abortion from the political standpoint of some of these Republican states could potentially go too far. Even though I think the Democrats are making things up about how, some of these Republican states are trying to just ban abortion and have no exceptions. Yes, there are definitely states that have some legislators that are proposing that. But there's no realistic chance of those things actually passing, right? You can propose anything, right? Anybody can propose anything. That doesn't mean that that's what the party in the state actually wants to do. Evidenced by what happened in Kansas, in which the conservative voters there, that's a red state, rejected a constitutional amendment that would have given state lawmakers more authority to regulate abortion, okay? They rejected that. So yes, there is a small minority of people in the Republican Party and conservatives, particularly the more, evangelical Catholic wing of the party, that just want to flat out ban abortion no matter what. No exceptions. However, they are very, very few, okay? And I don't think that's the direction the party is headed in. But regardless of that, what I'm saying is that nobody's going to vote on that, right? Nobody's going to the polls in the general election saying, hey, as a woman, Am I concerned about an issue that really only affects me if I get pregnant? I want an abortion and I live in a state that has effectively banned abortion. Or am I going to vote on an issue that is affecting me every single day? Okay, every time I go to the grocery store, I'm seeing that eggs cost more, meat costs more, bread costs more, milk costs more. Everything around me is costing more. It is getting harder to afford to live because of inflation, right? Again, these people are so out of touch because the reality is that the only people that can afford not to worry about inflation are the rich, right? The rich elitists. They're the only people that can afford not to worry about it. Everybody else who's not a rich elitist, that's at the top of their minds because it's almost like we're being taxed. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's a tax. So again, man, if the Democrat Party is thinking this way, if they think that social justice and police reform and abortion are much more important issues that people care about, okay, than inflation, okay, knock yourself out, right? Campaign on that then. Campaign on that. That's what I want you to do because that ensures that you're going to lose. That ensures that you won't keep power. Because that exact line of thinking is how the Democrats got themselves here in the first place because all they want to focus on is that stuff. Oh, your voting rights are under attack. Oh my God, the country's systemically racist. Oh my God, they're trying to take away a woman's rights. And it's like, people aren't falling for that anymore. People don't care about that anymore. Biden's poll numbers are bad, not because of any of those issues. They're bad because of the economy. That's it. It's in the poll numbers, bro. It's almost like these people that claim they have all the facts. All the facts are on our side. You hear that from progressive Democrats all the time. Well, all the facts are on our side. It's almost like they hate facts when the facts don't agree with their narrative, right? They can't stand facts. Well, the American people are actually really worried about police reform, right? They're actually really worried about social justice and abortion and gun control, right? Mass shootings. They're more worried about that than they are the economy. Sure. Things, again, that really don't really affect people's lives every single day. Those are luxury issues that only liberal elitists worry about, right? And they tell normal folks that this is what you should worry about over the economy, which they've screwed up, right? The Democrat Party screwed up. Again, that was one of the stupidest conversations I ever heard in my life. But again, I'm glad they're having it, right? I'm glad this is what they're saying because it is a signal that this is what the Democrat strategists are thinking and this is what they're going to campaign on in 2022 in the midterms. That and probably Trump hatred and the democracy being under attack. They're going to campaign on that instead of the economy, which is what people actually care about, and that will ensure that they lose. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.